Wake up, Toronto. How's it going? Happy Thursday. And I'm just so excited because today's lineup is a bit different as we'll be welcoming a guest on our show. And I must say, these are my favorite segments because I get to hang out with people and hear them talk about their life and experiences. And it doesn't feel like work at all, which is awesome. Our special guest began creating a stir on social media platforms like Instagram and TikTok in the most positive of ways. And this happened a couple months back, so it's fairly recent. So she took the initiative to share her passion, dreams, and goals to the world in hopes to inspire young women to break traditional expectations that South Asian societies may still have of females working certain jobs and not being respected or treated equally when pursuing a career that is mostly male-driven. She is on a mission to change the narrative and has gained love and support from her followers all over the world. Without further ado, please welcome to the show, Falak Mughal. Hello, Falak. Thank you so much for joining us on Wake Up Toronto. And I'm super amped to talk to women like you who are strong, independent, and just striving to make a difference in our community.
Thank you so much, Suzanna. I'm so excited to be on the show today. I'm really honored and happy that I get to talk about a career that I love so much. So thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the career path you chose. What was it about becoming a police officer and a member of the RCMP that made you feel like this is your true calling?
Honestly, growing up, I was just always one of those kids that knew exactly what they wanted to be when they grow up. I grew up watching shows like Law and Order and Criminal Minds, and just watching those police officers and detectives in their uniforms, the thrill and adrenaline I used to get just watching them, I'm like, I want to do this when I grow up. And the more I learned about policing and the career that can come out of it, the more I got attracted to it. And the reason I ended up picking the RCMP was because of all the opportunities that come with it. You get to work basically anywhere in Canada, and there's endless job options. So that's truly what made me attracted to join the RCMP for my policing career.
I love that part where you mentioned how you had an idea what you wanted to do when you were older. And I share that same feeling when I was as young as 10 years old. Call it your gut telling you or your conscience kind of pulling you towards that dream. But I knew that I wanted to be a journalist, and I didn't know how I was going to get there or how it would pan out. But here we are today, and it's great to see it come full circle, you know. Having said that, were you always drawn to policing, like you mentioned when you were young, or was there another job you were considering to explore?
Policing has definitely always been my calling, and it was just something I've always wanted to do. But if I really had to think about an alternative career, I would have liked for my parents to let me star on a Disney TV show, but we all know that wasn't going to happen, so I stuck to policing.
Hey, wasn't that like every child's dream to land an opportunity on the Disney network and have their own show, kind of like Hannah Montana, played by Miley Cyrus, or the Selena Gomez, who was on Wizards of Waverly Place, and they become icons and household names, and they're huge celebrities today, although they are exploring other parts of their career, but that would have been such a sweet life. But taking it back to joining the force, which was your backup, let's tie it with families from our South Asian backgrounds. And it's not very common for women of color to take on these jobs without it being a heated conversation with parents. And I know you know what I mean. So Falak, can you describe to us that moment where you introduced the idea of becoming a police officer to your family, and how did that discussion go?
Well, let's just say it wasn't the most pleasant conversation. Initially, my dad actually thought I was joking, and so did my mom. They thought I was just kidding around and that I was just throwing up different careers left, right, and center, because I was obviously going through that stage in high school where we were kind of finalizing our courses and all of that stuff. And my dad actually thought I was joking, but when he realized I was serious, it was a moment of, but girls don't do that. And that's when I knew, okay, this is going to be a roller coaster of a journey. But honestly, I stuck to it. I'm glad I did, because now my parents couldn't be happier that I chose a career in policing.
I'm so glad as well that you stuck to this. Let's fast forward to your first day of learning. Now, in a career that is still mainly male dominated, what was your feeling before walking into the room? Were you surprised or not? And did you see more women like yourself enrolled?
I wasn't surprised at all. Prior to policing, I actually joined security just to get exposure to the world of shift work and wearing a uniform and things of that nature. And even security is very male dominated. So going into policing, I knew it was going to be the same thing. The initial feelings I did have was like nervousness, and I was a little bit intimidated and things like that. But I was also excited. I was also motivated, and I had this fire inside me that wanted to prove this point that Muslim brown girls, we also can be police officers, and we're not going anywhere.
Girl, I couldn't agree with you more about security job positions and how they're still very much influenced by males. And years ago, I used to work for Cadillac Fairview, one of their properties here in Toronto, in the administration side of things. But the security guards that we dealt with were, if not all, mostly male. I think out of 20 people, only 2 were women. And that statistic is horrible. It's wrong and it's disgusting. So I am very much happy that you are trying to change that narrative. And women of color and women in general can be badasses and do just as well of a job. I wanted to look at the curriculum of things when it comes to policing. What parts did you absolutely love and which didn't you like so much?
I will say the overall policing training and curriculum is quite challenging. I would definitely say it's not a walk in the park. No one should go into police training thinking it's going to be easy, because it's not. It is an overall challenging environment, and that's the whole point, because it prepares you for the real world, because the situations police officers are put in, they're not easy, and you're taught to think on your feet and things of that nature. So I definitely found it difficult. The parts I obviously loved were teamwork, the people I met. I met my husband there, which was really awesome. So obviously those were the stuff I absolutely loved. But the challenging parts, I definitely will say, for me at least, was fitness. And I think a lot of that comes from my culture, because growing up, brown girls are taught that girls don't work out. You're going to gain muscles. You're going to have this. You're going to have that. But I ended up realizing that that was my biggest setback, because I only got to prepare for my police fitness stuff approximately 2 years before I got into the academy. And that's definitely not enough. I suggest to anybody trying to join policing, you need a minimum of 3 years of hardcore, proper cardio training and circuit training to be well-versed in the fitness world, I would say. Because for me, that's what I found the most challenging, and I did feel very underprepared when it came to that.
You're going to have to give me a little bit more juicy details of how you met your husband at the academy. So maybe when we're off air, we can discuss that, because I appreciate and love a good love story. But I mean, wow, 3 years of just training for fitness and getting to where you need to be is awfully a long time. But if you're listening right now and taking notes, like, highlight fitness or put a star beside that, because Falak mentioned it's one of the core components of becoming a successful police officer in the field. And not that I know anything about the training, but just hearing you describe it right now is giving me anxieties. So get it together, Suzanna. Let's bring it back to the discussion. Now, I know a few friends in Toronto who went through a policing program before being placed in the division where they currently work. They said there's a lot of reading, memorizing, as well as lots of assessments, interviews, and paperwork that goes into it. But they said that the theory aspects were fine. They were cool with it. The really tough part was the practical components, which were the fitness tests. And you briefly kind of talked about that right now, but I'm sure going through that experience, did that motivate you to push harder and work out? And can you share some stories about that?
It definitely 100% pushed me to work harder. When you're with the RCMP and you're training, cadets are expected to pass a fitness test called the pair, which is essentially a circuit that's timed. And I always found myself running that 2 to 3 times a week, where the average cadet may run it once a week or maybe a couple times a month. And I always used to make sure that I partnered up with someone in the group who was a lot better at it than me, who's faster than me, just so I can learn techniques and tips and they can see what I could do to improve myself. And I overall think that helped me so much.
What a great piece of advice and tip that I think is relevant in any job that you work in, as well as for your own personal growth. I mean, when you surround yourself with an expert, you're trusting them and they're well versed already in that topic or occupation, and they can teach you something valuable. You need that type of guidance to help you improve your skill set and correct your mistakes. So I am very glad that you reached out to this individual and they were of help to you. Now let's go back to fitness. I'm more of a cardio girl and light weights. I mean, the beep test in high school was something I dreaded every year. But with policing, I feel like you have to constantly be working to stay in shape. It's like a consistent kind of routine, especially wearing all of that gear and pretending you're in a real life situation. So is it true, like in the movies where they do have these intense obstacle training and courses?
Oh yeah, that's for sure. We did a lot of circuit training. We ran the beep test a lot and I hated every minute of it. I also dreaded it a lot in high school. So when I saw it again, I was like, oh man, I really thought I was done with this.
Damn you, beep test. But Falak, I totally sympathize with you that you had to go through all of that pain again and again and again. So although with the times, we've seen most parents change their views on what they think is a suitable role for their children, they are a bit more liberal and supportive, and some believe in no gender biases. Eventually, it comes down to succeeding and proving your point. Do you think that the moment you graduated, it was like a complete 360, that your parents were finally seeing what they couldn't before, that they were on your side?
Absolutely. I think the moment when my parents saw me in the red serge, which is the RCMP ceremonial uniform, which is known worldwide, I think that moment was life-changing for my parents. Just seeing all the traditions, the customs, and seeing their daughter be handed the badge for the very first time was that moment where my parents realized my daughter just accomplished her dreams. And this is something to be happy and proud of.
Okay, I'm getting goosebumps. I love a happy ending. And I can just visualize having you tell that story, the energy that was felt in the room, the overwhelming feelings of joy and happy tears. And now that the barricade, has come down, is it easier to talk about your shift work with your parents?
Yes and no. The yes, because I'm able to tell my parents, hey, I'm working day shift, I'm working night shift. And if something really awesome happens at work, I'm able to have that conversation with my parents. But the average shift of a police officer isn't all fun and games. It's really dangerous. We deal with some heavy stuff. And I don't think it's that easy to talk about that stuff with my parents because it'll just make them worry. So it's not that I can't have those conversations. It's just I don't want to have those conversations because a few times that I have shared a couple scary things that I've dealt with at work, just their reaction was enough for me to get, a little bit worried and was like, yeah, I don't think my parents are ready to hear these stories yet.
I don't think you want to make them feel uneasy or have nightmares, and above all, have to worry about you when you're clocked in, which might make them feel panicked or, have sleepless nights. So withholding that information is key here. They're not ready. But because I have you on this topic now, paint me a picture here. How was your official first day shift or night shift as a cop? And is there a difference in what type of calls you get?
My first day was 3.5 years ago, and it was a day shift. I remember being paired up with my field coach. There was tons of learning and paperwork. The calls weren't too bad that day. It was things like minor thefts, break-ins overnight, kind of, that were reported in the daytime, some minor disturbances, and it really just started to pick up. I found like 1 or 2 weeks after I was there, and the calls just vary. I can't even say that day shifts are smoother, because some day shifts are worse than night shifts sometimes, and no day is the same. Crime happens regardless of day or night.
For the longest time, when we think of cops, what comes to mind is scenes where we see in the movies, like the high-speed chases, undercover sting operations, one cop fighting 10 guys at once. Okay, maybe the last one is a little over-exaggerating from Bollywood cinema, but would you say there are similar scenarios that could happen in real life?
Oh yeah, there's definitely similar scenarios that we deal with in real life. The high-speed car chases are definitely a thing, and so are the operations. But what I will say is, this stuff that you see on TV, Bollywood, Hollywood, it shows things happen very quickly, and that all this stuff is ready to go, hands on deck, and it doesn't work that way in real life. If you're in a high-risk situation and you need a certain specialty team to get called out, it doesn't just happen within seconds. It takes a lot of time, and that's stuff that TV doesn't cover. So yeah, it's quite similar, but the timeline, I would say, is a lot different.
Yeah. Like in Hollywood cinema, it's usually movies are an hour 45, 2 hours, and Bollywood, you got 3 hours, 3.5, sometimes pushing 4, and you've got to jam pack as much action in as possible for the audience members. And so definitely I feel like that timeline is very different from reality. You have certain protocols that you probably have to follow through with. Now, what is the most out of comfort situation you've been in while on the job, and how did you handle it?
The most uncomfortable situation I've been at on the job, I don't think I'm quite ready to talk about yet. I still think I am healing from that, and it's going to take some time to completely process that. But I do still come across uncomfortable situations all the time, and I find the way I handle it best is talking about it. I feel like it's very important as police officers to have confidants and people that are your support system. For me, it's definitely my husband, my sister, and my best friends that I basically dump and vent all like the stresses I kind of go through. And I feel like talking and unpacking those situations helps me handle it a lot better, because I'm able to vocalize my emotions, what I was feeling, my thoughts, what I feel like I could have done differently. Just going through that helps me process things, if that makes any sense.
Most definitely. I feel like in this day and age, compared to years ago, it wasn't spoken about as much, but now there are resources available, facilitators and hotlines and people that you can connect with to discuss what you are going through in your life. No issue is big or small, and your well-being is so important, especially in your field of work. I can only imagine how tough it can be when you go into a shift and it's not what you've expected. It's traumatic, it's disturbing, it's hard to get out of your mind. And the fact that you have this support system around you that cares for you and hears your stories and how you're feeling, your emotions, that you're able to go through that process with them as well, and overcome that obstacle. So when you go into work, it's a different day. You can start anew. So that is definitely a beautiful core people that you have in your life. Now, from when we briefly spoke, I remember you said that your best part of being a cop is that not every day is the same. Do you still feel that way, and why?
100%. Honestly, no 2 days are the same. I walk into work some mornings, I'm able to grab my coffee and just do some paperwork. Other days, I'll be walking into the change room and the radio is going off and there's calls lined up. So yeah, I just never know what I'm going to walk into when I go into work.
I bet you thrive off of the more busier days where your schedule is packed with so many things you need to accomplish. And I think a few questions back, we kind of explored this, that more so the aftermath of going to work and the things that you see that are unsettling and often hard to digest, and you have that core group of people where you can open up to and release and heal. I want to visit a different part of the same question, which is with every profession that comes with the good, the bad, and ugly, sometimes fear can be the cause of the latter half. And in your case, the career path that you have, it is a scary place to be sometimes. So do you ever fear your safety while working? And how do you prepare or ground yourself?
When we get high-risk calls at work, by default, your fear increases. And I think the best way to prepare for that is, again, talking. Communication. That is absolutely key. I have an awesome team that I work with, and when a high-risk call comes in on the radio, whether we're all together or separate, it's just communicating what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, and just having that clear picture of how we're going to be dealing with the situation. That in itself is very comforting to me. And how I ground myself, honestly, I personally just say prayers. I usually say prayers when I'm at work all the time, but when I have a high-risk situation, I especially pray a lot more during those times. It's just something that calms me down.
You know what they say, teamwork is the dream work, especially when there's communication involved. It kind of takes such a serious, critical situation and puts you at ease, knowing that everybody has their designated roles in that very difficult situation. And then prayer, it's that extra layer of protection for those who believe in a higher power, and it puts your mind and your body sort of in a state of peace and calmness. So let's talk about social media now. Your username is at That Desi Girl Cop on Instagram, and I believe TikTok as well. And I love the representation going on with that name. How did you decide that this was the account name?
I remember being on the phone with my best friend and we were brainstorming all these ideas. I knew exactly what I wanted to do with my page and what I was going to talk about. I just didn't know what I was going to name it. And I think it was because I was just trying to incorporate like a bunch of like buzzwords. I wanted to include the fact that I was a girl. I wanted to make it a point that I was South Asian. There were just so many things that were running through my head. And overall, I think it was just one of those things where I'm like, I just wanted to sound catchy. And it was along the lines of like That Desi Girl Cop, That Desi Muslim Cop. Like I didn't know what I wanted to go with until I actually wrote it down. And the phrase that caught on to me the most was That Desi Girl Cop. And I just ran with it.
Girl, I am so glad you went with that username, because not only is it short, it's simple, it's catchy, it's relevant to anyone who's scrolling through, or it shows up on the Explore page and asks, users to check your account out. And it's perfect, definitely, for the message that you're trying to deliver. You started off with a couple behind the scene videos, which you made clear that you share after your shifts and not during. That's highly important. I don't think when you're a cop and on the job, you're allowed to dabble in personal paraphernalia, right? Some of the content that you share is like Q&As from other followers who want to know how to begin the process of choosing a major in policing, to prepping for interviews, educational tips, volunteering and techniques on the next steps as well towards becoming an RCMP, and what the requirements encapsulate. Since your first post, you've hit nearly 5,000 plus followers. It's growing day by day. How amazing is that?
It's honestly such an incredible feeling. I'm very, very grateful for such a positive response that I got starting this page just a few months ago. The fact that I'm already at 5,000, it makes me feel so happy, excited, and humbled, like all rolled into one.
Feeling all the good vibes. I love hearing that. And technically, you're offering a free service and coaching complete strangers. That is a selfless act of kindness. How has the feedback been? And of course, the positive DMs that have been coming through. Can you share a few with us?
Like I mentioned earlier, the feedback has just been so outstanding. I've come across some of the sweetest, kindest people through this page, and it just makes my day reading some of the great messages that I receive. And message that I'm actually going to share really made my day, and I still think about it a lot, is from a girl who had been following me for a few months, and she just reached out to me just a few weeks ago, and she wrote, You were the reason my parents agreed to let me join law enforcement. You've impacted my life a lot and you have no idea. I teared up when I actually read that message, and I know that sounds cheesy, but I teared up, I think, at the fact that I was able to make that change in someone's life. It was so wholesome. Like, we had such a great conversation after that, and it was beautiful. It really made my day. And another message that I always think about is from a mom with 2 daughters. She had wrote, I'm a Desi Muslim as well. I'm married, I've been an immigrant, and I have 2 daughters, 3 and 9 months. Both of the girls are born in Canada. I've always had this dream of wanting to be a police officer, but was never able to say it out loud. Keep going. I want my daughters to be just like you. The fact that I have parents wanting their kids to be like me when they grow up, it's just so sweet. Like, I just love that so much. It's just, I have no words. I have all the cheesy words in the book. I'm going to use them because that's literally how I feel.
I gotta say, if being cheesy changes lives, go for it. It's all in or nothing. And Falak, I'm so grateful that you shared those 2 stories with us today. I mean, they're real life people, and they've reached out to you with something so personal, and you're changing the narrative one person at a time. And how incredible is that? I found myself like tearing up. So what you're doing is a fantastic job. Now, with all the women that are actually, DMing you, are they specifically looking to get into becoming a cop, or have they told you that you helped guide them to pursue other gender inclusive careers like the trades, whether that be in automotives or construction workers, etc.?
For me, in my experience personally, the majority of the questions have been related to policing. I've had a handful of girls that have reached out to me and told me that through this page, they have been able to go into security, fire, and paramedics, which is also very male-dominated. So the fact that my page was even able to inspire that gets me really, really happy.
Of course, your page is dedicated to your industry and your expertise in policing, but it's also a breath of fresh air, I feel like, when you inspire other people who are going into fields that are also highly male influenced and dominated. And if you could also shift the narrative there a little bit, you're making huge moves. With that being said, do you feel fulfilled with what you were hoping to accomplish when creating these social media profiles for That Desi Girl Cop?
100%. I'm very, very happy with what I was able to accomplish with this page so far, and this is only the beginning. I have so much more planned, and I'm really excited about it.
And not only are you this online presence that has created such a successful movement, and it's only growing, but you also go on location to other schools and do talks. I've seen some pictures of kids sitting in the police cars, absolutely fascinated, of course, and looking super cute. Tell us more about your commitment to visiting other schools and speaking to these kids who are always talking about, when I grow up, I want to be blank, or I want to be blank.
So a lot of the stuff that you see posted on my page when it comes to speaking at conferences, visiting kiddos at school, or attending events, I usually do that on a volunteer basis. I'm currently in general duty, and when we're at work, it's usually very busy all the time. So I do have opportunities where I'm able to attend events if they're happening during my shift, but it's not very often. So I just like to go out of my way on my own time. It really is something that makes me happy. My husband also takes part in many of the things that I do, and for us, we look at it as for us, it's not work when we do it. It's just stuff that just makes us really, truly happy. And it's a labor of love at the end of the day.
I felt that when you do something that you love, it doesn't feel like work at all. Now, what's a key piece of advice you give to these kids when you go visit them?
I think the type of advice I usually give to the kids, it really depends on what they're asking me, what goal that they have. And if there's any one liner I would give, it's always follow your dreams. Don't fall into this expectation of what people and what your parents want from you. Do what makes you happy, because at the end of the day, you're going to be the one that's going to be doing it for the rest of your life.
Following your dreams is as simple as it gets, but but it carries so much weight, especially for kids who are very susceptible and influential at this age. And so they need a reality check at times to kind of let them know that they should be leading their path to the success that they hope to accomplish in the future. And a job isn't worth it if you're waking up every morning dreading to go in. You have to be happy for the most part with what you do for the rest of your life. You currently live on the West Coast in Edmonton. Any plans to move to Toronto in the near future, or at least visit, maybe even do some school talks out here?
My husband and I definitely plan and intend to move back to Toronto. At the end of the day, Toronto is my comfort zone. It's my home, and there's no place like home. But in the meantime, I am visiting quite a bit, and I've been invited to a few school conferences and events. And recently, I actually was speaking at the University of Toronto Islamophobia and Higher Education Conference, and that was my alma mater. So honestly, it was an honor being there.
You're talking to a U of T alumni, but I completely agree with you. Home is home. I was born and raised in Toronto. I moved to Vancouver, British Columbia, stayed there for many, many years, and then moved back for university. And that's where I went to U of T, and it's such a great school. And I think a lot of amazing things happen, especially these leadership groups. They invite special guests and people get to hear their stories, their experiences, what they've been through. And it's like inspo central. You build connections and friendships, and it really is such a privilege and honor. So I'm so glad you got that opportunity. Tell us a little bit about what kinds of things you shared to those in attendance.
It honestly was so awesome. I got to speak about my experiences being a Muslim and Pakistani police officer, what my training was like, my experience being Muslim in Ontario versus Alberta, which is very, very different. I find people in Ontario are a lot more aware about the Islamic religion. They know more about Pakistani culture and things like that. And I found being in Alberta, I had to kind of explain a lot of things which I thought were very known. Things like what Ramadan and Eid are. I found in Ontario, if I just spoke to someone, they knew exactly what I was talking about. But in Alberta, they were like, oh, what's Ramadan? And I kind of had to explain everything from scratch. So it was a lot of things like that. And my overall, just my experiences and what I've been dealing with over the last 3 years being away from home.
Wow, lots of things you unpacked and topics you covered. And when it comes to cultural education, I think that's super important. Here in Toronto, there's lots of multiculturalism, undeniably, right? And it's very diverse. And people are well aware of all the different religions and sometimes the practices, like special days that are observed by them. We have a huge following of Islam. And so when you travel the country and you go to different parts of the provinces, there's certain pockets that aren't aware of culture. And within those dense populations, questions do arise and people are curious. I think it's great to kind of educate them on that instead of them being unaware, because they'll label you just because you are of brown skin and you're a woman. They'll just plainly think you're Indian, and they just check those boxes for you to identify who they think you are, and they get it wrong time and time again. It's super important to be mindful, get the facts. There is more to than what physical appearance meets the eye, and there's Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, Gujarati, Sri Lankan, and different dialects at that as well. And just because their skin is brown, right? How can you really tell? So that's my little spiel on representation and diversity and kind of doing your research. So let's bring it back to something positive. It seems like everything you kind of manifested, like your goals, are becoming a reality. Can you describe what kind of feelings you were going through before, during, and after walking on that stage and taking the podium?
When I was first walking to the podium, I was just so nervous. I haven't been in an academic setting in years, basically since I graduated. So I was nervous about speaking to a group of such intellectual and smart students because I was coming back to my university, but with a career this time. And I was like, whoa, I forgot what it's like to talk all academic. So that part definitely made me nervous, but I was also just very happy and excited being there. I left with a smile on my face. The audience was so engaging. They were so lovely. And the overall feedback was just so awesome. I really had a good time.
What a surreal moment that must have been for you. And I hope you get even more speaking gigs so you're less nervous when you take the mic. Now, Falak, I always ask my guests this question, as we all may live by a saying that resonates with us. And I've had a look at your quote, and it's so wonderful to see you bring in your Pakistani Muslim roots and turn to words from the Quran. And I would love for you to read the line and tell us its meaning to you.
Verily, with every hardship comes ease. That's a line I grew up reading in the Quran ever since I was a young kid. I never truly understood the meaning of that until I started getting older. I would deal with obstacles. I would struggle with certain situation, whether it was at school or at home with my job, career, etc. And every time I would be at my breaking point and I was like, okay, I'm about to hit rock bottom, I'd always go back to that line because it was a reminder to me that every time I did go through a hard time in my life, I ended up having a positive and good outcome, and I always ended up learning. So when I'm going through a tough time, even when I am at work, that line is a reminder to me that no matter what, ease and good is going to come from it. This is just a struggle right now.
If that line has helped you triumph in good times and bad, those are magic words, and you better hold it in a special place in your heart and know that it will get you through absolutely anything in life. Falak, it truly has been so awesome speaking to you. I feel spiritually charged to keep hustling with some of my bucket list things, as well as help our South Asian brothers and sisters in some capacity so they can go out into the world and hit the target with their goals instead of giving up and regretting it later on in life, which happens quite often because of the lack of resources, low self-esteem, and discouragement. You are such a positive influence, and I can't wait to see where your journey leads you. I'm so proud of you. You have an open invitation to come back and chat with us again.
Thank you so much for having me on the show today. It's just been a pleasure. And honestly, all the questions that you've asked me, I'm so appreciative of the fact that you're so supportive of other women and their endeavors. And when I found out that you were a brown girl and you're in journalism, it just made me so happy to see you doing what you love. It really made my day. And this collaboration has just been awesome. Thank you so much.
Oh, my heart. I'm going to cry. Thank you so much for those sentimental, beautiful words. I really appreciate the love. And Wake Up Toronto listeners, that's a wrap on this segment. Be sure to follow Falak on Instagram and TikTok at That Desi Girl Cop. Drop her a like or a hello in the comments. And if you have any questions about policing or advice on where to really begin, send her a DM. She will reply when off duty. If you have a short story to tell and want to be featured on the next Wake Up Toronto show, send us an email to suzannatv.tv@gmail.com. Have a great weekend, everyone.